Donald Trump engineered on November 5th the American version of Brexit. I call it Dexit, the largest exodus of Democrats from the Democratic Party in over half a century. There is a Dexit movement right now.
The idea of deterrence is going to come back into vogue. The idea of appeasement is gone. The idea that America is back in this game and really in this game, not to offend, not to oppress, not to do anything that puts them at risk other than to cause them not to be able to continue to push their agendas.
Donald Trump is just a unique, relentless character. His drive to fix America exceeds most humans, I think, limits and expectations. A lot of other people would have folded up and said, I'm done. I'm tired of being insulted. Not Donald Trump.
Donald Trump speaks to working class values, free speech, freedom of worship, respect for other people, which means, incidentally, respect for their opportunity to criticize you and offend you, because that's how we get to truth in this country.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Weber. You're watching Better for America. Joining me now to discuss President Donald J. Trump's landslide victory and what that reveals about the MAGA movement are two distinguished guests. John Solomon is an award-winning investigative journalist. He's an author and digital media entrepreneur. He serves as the chief executive officer and editor-in-chief of Just the News. Also joining me now is today's AMAC's very own spokesman, Robert Charles. Bobby Charles, always good to have you with me. Great to be here with you both, gentlemen.
Good to be with you, Rebecca.
Great to be here, and an exciting moment in American history.
It certainly is. It feels like morning in America, and a beautiful morning it is. I want to turn to you first, John. I want to talk about what the polls got right and wrong about Trump's historic night. This was quite interesting. We saw key battleground states where Trump really gained national support. We saw a landslide electoral college victory, and Trump won the popular vote. What do you think this says about Trump's strategy and then the issues that matter most to American voters?
Well, listen, I don't think Donald Trump's movement ever shrunk one bit. I think it's the same size and energetic movement that put him in 2016, and that was there for him in 2020 and then showed up again in 2024. I think the only difference in the vote totals, the reason that Republicans did so much better than Democrats, is they got into the early voting game and they got those voters who might not be able to show up on election day, and they got them in the ballot box early, either through absentees and others. That created millions more voters who are part of the MAGA movement, but maybe on a Tuesday of election day couldn't get to the ballot box because of life circumstances. It is the great untold story, and AMAC was at the forefront of that. AFW was at the forefront of that. Scott Presler was at the forefront of that. And of course, Charlie Kirk and Ralph Reed. Millions more MAGA supporters got to go to the polls because they voted early, and that just increased the size of the vote total to match the enthusiasm that I think Donald Trump has had every second since he walked down or came down the escalator in 2015. The issues of MAGA are America's issues. The issues of Kamala Harris were the elitist issues of the time. America don't want elitist ideas. They want their ideas to be the law and the policy of the land, and they said that with resounding success. Meanwhile, the switcheroo that the Democrats did at the top of the ticket, they put in Kamala Harris for Joe Biden. I said this from the moment it happened. I said, I guarantee you Democrats will wake up on Election Day wishing they had Joe Biden back on the ticket. Kamala Harris underperformed Joe Biden in every precinct, in every county, in every state of America. She underperformed him significantly, proving that she wasn't ready for prime time and that her true progressive ideas, which she often refused to tell people about, are just not the ideas of America. They don't match what AMAC's audience wants, what the patriots of America want for it. And so it's a rejection of the races, an embrace of Donald Trump, and a rejection of all the things that the left stood for: lawfare, insanity, inflation, and insecurity.
Yeah, I think Harris and her camp really underestimated what was important to Americans. And today they're playing a little bit of a blame game. But boy, it was really just incredible to see so many people turn out and show up, so many people voting early as well. Bobby, I want to turn to you and talk about our U.S. adversaries. We know that a Trump presidency could have significant implications for U.S. relations. I mean, countries like Iran, Russia, and China, tensions are quite high. How do you foresee the Trump presidency really translating into positive outcomes for all Americans?
You know, there are some things, Rebecca, that it takes time to do, and there are some things that happen automatically, almost instantaneously. The recognition, and I've even heard this is so-called on the street through emails and texts from people, the recognition immediately by Putin, by Iran, by Xi, that it's a new world order here, that the idea of deterrence is going to come back into vogue. The idea of appeasement is gone. The idea that America is back in this game and really in this game, not to offend, not to oppress, not to do anything that puts them at risk other than to cause them not to be able to continue to push their agendas in an aggressive way against the United States and the Western world. I think what you're witnessing right now, it's kind of interesting to look at this historically. And John mentioned, all these things that have happened that haven't happened before, including the early voting. But one thing that really washed over me is the notion that in many ways Trump realigned the American electorate in a way that was very similar to the way that Reagan realigned it between 1980 and 1984, creating an incredible landslide in 1984. But one of the things that happened at the very same time that Reagan, and we don't talk about this very much, that Reagan was realigning the domestic electorate around the idea of working class values, the Bill of Rights, the idea of a solvent government, the idea that we would protect not only our borders, but we would protect our country forever, and that freedom really had meaning, that it wasn't just a word you comes off your lips in a concession speech. It's a real thing. Freedom is something that involves allowing more power to devolve to the individual, stopping this notion that we're a bunch of groups, and actually getting us back to the idea that the Bill of Rights is real. At the same time that Reagan realigned the domestic population, he actually lined up allies abroad in a way that ultimately brought down the Soviet Union. What happened is that this idea that America has credibility, that our word matters, that what we say is what we mean, that came back in living color in 1984. And Americans of every variety and allies and adversaries said, wow. I mean, in the Politburo, literally, in that era, and I think you could see something similar happening inside some of our adversaries now, in the Politburo, Edmund Morris wrote that they shuddered because they said, my God, he said that, he would do these things, and he did them. And look what he says about us. We're going to be on the ash heap of history. And 5 years later, they were. So the bottom line is, people who hold their word, people who are true to their word, are incredible leaders. And we have one of those people right now about to become our president again.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes. And, John, what I found fascinating really was the fact that Donald Trump, he won hearts and minds in all age groups. What I found really interesting was the younger group, the 18 to 30-year-olds. J.D. Vance, he was a strategic vice president pick for Trump. He really focused his discussions on the key issues, economy, border security. How influential are vice president picks in shaping campaign messaging? And do you think that he was a main player in really winning the younger vote?
I do. And I would say in 90% of elections, vice presidential picks don't matter that much. They're the person who can most succeed as president and who is usually most aligned with the president or president-elect, as we have now. But J.D. Vance created a generational opportunity. Everyone else in the race was 60 and above or 59 and above, but not J.D. Vance. And he created a youthful enthusiasm, and he created a license for young Americans to say, I know my teachers and my educators told me I should vote left, but it isn't working for me. I can't afford a home. I'm having a hard time getting a job. I can't even afford my energy bills. I have energy poverty and gas poverty and grocery cart poverty. And J.D. Vance said, I understand that. And he talked in a way that young people often don't hear their political leaders talk. And I think he, coupled with the incredible surrogate army that Donald Trump put together, when you throw Elon Musk alongside of J.D. Vance, and you throw Joe Rogan alongside them, and you throw all of these younger people, the MMA fighters, they gave license to young people who have felt disillusioned with their democratic upbringing that their educators imposed on them, and disillusioned with the experience of the Biden-Harris years. And they found somebody that they could relate to. Robert F. Kennedy when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. came aboard, when Bobby came aboard, he gave license to Democrats to say, you know what, the party left me too. I'm going to go give Donald Trump a try. One of the things that Donald Trump did, and I love Bobby's analysis to Reagan because I see so many parallels between 1980 and 2024. But we began talking about 1980 and 84, the Reagan Democrats, those Democrats who left the party. Donald Trump engineered on November 5th the American version of Brexit. I call it Dexit, the largest exodus of Democrats from the Democratic Party in over half a century. There is a Dexit movement right now, and I think it will continue as long as conservatives and Republicans stay engaged with these new constituencies. Don't take them for granted like the Democratic Party. And AMAC was a big part of that. I have these fond memories of going to the first boot camp for boomers in Bucks County. That was my first experience. I know you did one in Florida, but I went to the Bucks County one. And the energy I saw, and the energy that I saw of seniors and people getting to the latter part of their life, 50 and up, wanting to make sure they did something for the young generation that inherits this country. And then you go back now, 8 months later, and you look what happened in Bucks County in terms of the Republican turnout, in terms of the energy, the engagement. Lots of young people in that county and other counties all across this country voted in much larger numbers for Republicans. There's something going on here, and that Dexit opportunity, those trained to be Democrats who were given license to leave the Democratic Party, that could be the lasting legacy of this election if Republicans and conservatives grasp it, treat it, nurture it, and expand it over the next few years.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And so much of what you say is really what we were hoping for and believing in. Good stuff right there. Oh, thank you, John. So, Bobby, how do you think Trump will get people back together? How do you think he's going to help Americans reset their compass to true north? And what do you think are the obstacles that he might have to overcome, especially with Democrats?
Yeah, this is really, in some ways, this is the question of the hour. And I'm going to pick up on what John just said, this idea of Dexit, the idea that Democrats left their party because their party left them. And what you have now is Trump in a position to say, look, what do you really believe? And if what you really believe is that you should have more opportunities to make your own decisions, that freedom is not just a word, that it really matters, and that you don't want more government mandates, if you don't want more government intrusion, more taxes, more spending. If you want to make some of these decisions on your own, maybe back at the state level, maybe at the individual level, maybe at the town level, this is really what Trump is about. He's about diffusion of power. Now, that is an important foundation for answering your question, because ironically, if you go back in history, you see that parties oscillate between popularity and sort of they're out of vogue for 4, 8, 12, even 20 years. And the interesting part is, I think what Donald Trump has done is created an environment that's more like a magnet. It's drawing people out of the Democrat Party, and they themselves, and I find it fascinating, have not understood. They're going to be thinking about it for a while, but they don't understand. They're not willing to acknowledge why they fell apart in this election cycle. And if they don't acknowledge that, if they become the Bernie Sanders AOC, scream and shout and we're going to tell you why you're wrong party, they will fringe. They will turn themselves into a fringe. I don't know if they're going to go the way of the Whigs, but they basically have put themselves in a position where Donald Trump speaks to working class values, free speech, freedom of worship, respect for other people, which means, incidentally, respect for their opportunity to criticize you and offend you, because that's how we get to truth in this country. Respect for your basic rights, your due process, which the Democrats trampled all over. Respect for separation of powers, respect for the Supreme Court, respect for the idea that if you're young and you want to get an education, you actually don't want to be taught to be an agitator. You want to be taught math and science and reading and writing and maybe electronics, and maybe how to be a mechanic or a carpenter, or how to be a plumber, or and this is why the unions turn to him. The Democrats have basically created an entitlement ideology, and in the face of that, Trump said, no, we're not all about causing you to become weaker. We want you to become stronger. We want you to be a stronger individual. We want you to live in strong and confident towns. We want you to have state economies that are booming. We want you to respect citizens and not have to deal with all these illegal aliens and the crime they bring and the drugs they bring. And in the end, that will produce a stronger country. I hear, and I don't know if he's going to use this phrase in his inaugural, but if he does, I'd like to hear it. Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan talked to the American people, not down to them. They didn't talk and tell them they needed to do X, Y, and Z. They said, I want you, both of them said, I want you to listen to your better angels. I want you to be your best self. That's all I'm asking you to be. And when an entire country of people refines their moral compass, and as you said, Rebecca, their North Star, their true north, the entire country realigns. Look, I'm not saying we'll all be Republicans in 4 years, but I'm telling you, the people who lost their minds are going to be hunting around trying to find them for quite a while.
For quite a while. It's a good point. And John, Trump's win makes him only the second president to serve non-consecutive terms. Do you think that this symbolizes really a shift in U.S. political dynamics? And what does it mean for the future of political brands, but specifically the Republican Party?
Yeah. Listen, I think it's almost impossible to do to go be a president, get thrown out, and then come back. I think only Donald Trump in the modern era could have done it. It is the greatest political comeback in American history because Grover Alexander didn't have 4 indictments, 2 impeachments, 2 assassination attempts, and $1 billion of lawfare thrown at him. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump had that on top of everything else, and he came back and won the country in not just a small fashion, but in a convincing fashion. Donald Trump is just a unique, relentless character. His drive to fix America exceeds most humans, I think, limits and expectations. A lot of other people would have folded up and said, I'm done. I'm tired of being insulted. Not Donald Trump. What does this moment say about the political electorate? I think they have buyer's remorse. I think they wish they had kept Donald Trump in office in 2020. They didn't. And so they were willing to do a rehire. And there are moments in American history, particularly in corporate America, where you bring your founder back and he resurrects the company a second time. I think Americans wanted Donald Trump to restore that magic that was lost over the last 4 years, and to get back to the experience they had in 2018 and 19 before COVID, where this country was rocking. It was profitable. The world was peaceful. Peace was even breaking out in the Middle East. And I think the thing that most voters I talked about in the last month of this election said was missing from the last 4 years is a word that comes up every day in AMAC: common sense. There was just no common sense. There's no common sense to giving Iran money so they could start their terrorist operations against the West again. There's no common sense in putting men in women's sports, boys in women's bathrooms, or felons who just got arrested back on the street in 24 hours so they could commit more felonies and create more harm. There's no common sense to keeping the border over. And I think that common sense agenda that Donald Trump had in his first term just felt like something they were missing. And they said, let's just turn back the clock. Let's go back to that. The challenge for Donald Trump is some of the institutions that were working a little bit more functionally in 16, 17, 18, 19, when he was in charge all the way through 20, they're more dysfunctional now. The CIA missed the Afghanistan and October 7th crises. That's very concerning. The Customs Border Patrol and ICE have been gutted so that they can't enforce the way we are. So Donald Trump has to fix a lot of things before he can get the role going that he had in 2017. But it does seem like he's going in with a head of steam. And also, at least in word, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have said they won't stand in the way. They will try to affect a good transition. That's a little different than what happened in December 16 when they were trying to foist fake allegations on Trump. So if the Democrats give a little window of grace, Donald Trump's going to start at 85 miles an hour on day one, which is January 20th, 2025.
And that's exactly what we're hoping for. But such a good point. Just Donald Trump, he demonstrated that he can relate to all Americans. I think he was genius to visit McDonald's, to get in the garbage truck, and really reach across the aisle and talk to people about the issues that mattered most to them, something so missing from Kamala Harris's campaign. Bobby, you know what can be done and you know what cannot be done in government. You were in the White House as an Assistant Secretary of State under Colin Powell, a 10-year Navy intelligence officer. Where are the big changes come? When, how quickly, I guess, to ride on John's comments there, how quickly do you think we'll see these changes? How fast do you think that we can start to see the real big changes, the things that people voted for, closed borders, fixing our educational system? The list goes on. Economy, we know what matters most to people.
Yeah, I am an innate optimist, and I like to think that my optimism is based on a grounding in history. I want to pick up on something you just said and something John just said before that, and tie this together immediately. Indeed, the learning process has already begun. Immediately, we as people gravitate, Democrat, Republican, we watch human nature, right? We know who we trust and who we don't trust. We know who we're willing to, whether you're looking in the eyes of a babysitter and you believe they're going to be responsible, or you're looking in the eyes of a clerk at a store and you understand what you're saying, what's being said to you is true or untrue. What happens is we're almost programmed to be students of human nature. What Donald Trump immediately is teaching and has taught throughout this campaign is that courage, and John, this is to your point, courage is tested. And it only really matters when it's tested. And you had a guy who they tried to bankrupt, they tried to jail, they tried to kill. And he said, no, I'm going to fight all of this. If I come down in the process, he's sort of I don't know. I mean, he's kind of I'm looking for an historic analogy. I mean, he's kind of a Nelson Mandela figure, because what he's saying is, go ahead and attack me. I am the living embodiment of the things you hate. And it's very clear what those are. You don't want my freedom to prevail. You don't want my belief in free markets to prevail. You don't want my belief in my freedom of speech to prevail. You gagged me. You riled people up who tried to kill me. And you know what? You're not going to stop me. I'm not going to stop. So the immediate thing that happens, Rebecca, in response to your question, is that the average American looks and says, gosh, it's like watching a good hockey player play before you go out to play. You go, man, they play really well. I think I could play that game. I think I could be as courageous, right? That's the first thing that happens. The second thing that's happening immediately is I got calls the morning after yesterday. I got calls from a slew of Democrats who said, I cannot tell my friends, Bobby, what I did, but I voted for Trump. And they said, one of the reasons I voted for Trump is because I can't tell my friends what I was going to do. I want that freedom back. If you talk policy, it's going to take executive orders at the front end to reverse all these Biden executive orders that shut down the energy sector. You'll immediately see a look at the appropriations process, and you'll see money go back to the border. You'll see money go back to our military. This is the end of DEI, CRT, ESG in the federal government. All of that is gone. You're going to see immediate actions on January 20 and probably even in the run up to January 20, trying to unstick all the things that got stuck. And you're going to see efforts to get spending down, to see taxes down, to encourage the Fed to have interest rates come down. You saw the market jump 1,500 points yesterday. I don't know that that's happened in my lifetime. What you see is confidence being restored. On the flip side, as a macro econ guy and as a national security guy, even though we're sending all the right signals, it's going to take us time to rebuild the U.S. Navy. They have done real damage to our shipbuilding and to some of our aviation assets. It's going to take time to get inflation down. But, I forgot who it was. I think it was Churchill, but it could have been Theodore Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump. 90% of getting something good done is envisioning it, believing in it, and working for it. And by God, we are there now.
Oh, thank you, Bobby. I have a question for each of you before we let you guys run. John, Trump's win is seen as a rejection of media portrayals, clearly, right? I mean, this guy had so much going against him, these legal challenges against him. Does this outcome suggest even more growing public distrust in media and institutions? And do you think that kind of skepticism is going to last beyond Trump's influence and into the future?
Oh, I think there's already a lasting outcome. When you look at the Gallup poll that came out a week before the election, we were all looking at the horse race polls, but Gallup did, I think, one of the most interesting and most important polls in American history, which is that the news media today are lower and less popular than even Congress, which has always been the whipping horse in the polling industry. 31% of Americans say they trust the media. most of the time to be fair and accurate. 36% said they never would trust it to be fair and accurate, and another 33% said they don't trust it most of the time to be accurate. In other words, 2/3 of America have tuned out media. They've decided that the traditional legacy media abandoned their post as truth tellers and became propagandists, and they're not even on the radar. And I see this every day in the dynamics of what I see now in social media and what I see in my own analytics as a new media company that's trying to get back to truth telling. People probably get more facts and information from the AMAC Newsline website than they get from the Washington Post and the New York Times. The Washington Post and New York Times are so wrong so often. I sometimes read them thinking, well, this is like The Onion. It's the parody side. I'm just going to go read it for fun. That never used to be the case. And I worked at the Washington Post. I was proud to work there. I worked at the Associated Press, but they have surrendered the hill and the bastion that Americans granted them to be truth purveyors in the 21st century, and a new industry is coming aboard. I think Donald Trump will do something pretty profound at the beginning of the administration. If you're a hockey player and you do something wrong in a hockey game, you get sent in the penalty box, right? And you got to think about, maybe next time I won't hit that guy with a stick or do what I'm going to do. I think Donald Trump is going to put the traditional political press in a penalty box. Now, there's this long lease in the White House that says that the White House correspondence has a right to have that press room in the White House. I think Donald Trump will say, you can have your lease, but you're not going to get briefed and you're not going to see me. I'm going to go set a new press room up over at the old executive office building, and the new media, the people who took time to be truthful and honest and fair and balanced and neutral, they're going to get the briefings, and you're going to sit in the penalty box and see what you think about it. Maybe you'll stew long enough to think about what it is you did wrong. That would be one of the greatest ICEs in American history. And I think that Donald Trump could do something like that because polling warrants it. The American people warrant it. They want this to change. And I think the only way the industry is going to change is when they feel the pain of isolation, not retribution, isolation, until they give a little bit of time and think. That's why you put a kid on timeout. That's why you put a hockey player in the penalty box. It's time for the mainstream media to be put in the penalty box just for a little while. I think they'll come out of it a little smarter.
Yes. And John, in follow-up, do you think that Trump's legal battles, any of that, I mean, we heard what Letitia James just said a few days ago, preparing for fight, preparing for battle. What's happening on that front in terms of these legal battles that the left has done everything to keep Donald Trump down?
Yeah, well, let's take the federal ones first. I think the federal ones are going to dissolve. We heard yesterday from the Justice Department that there's a process to wind down Jack Smith's investigation. What does that mean? He'll probably be shown the door before Donald Trump has to fire him on January 20th, and that the investigations, one of them has already been thrown out by a judge. My understanding is the Justice Department is going to tell the appeals court they're not going to contest that ruling anymore. So the classified documents case is going to go away against President Trump. And then I think the January 6th case that Judge Chutkan so fervently seems to like, I think the Justice Department may seek to withdraw that case, or maybe President Biden will do something even larger and say, listen, the era of recriminations are over. I'll pardon Donald Trump. Stop this nonsense. And I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump reciprocated and commuted any prison sentence that Hunter Biden would get. And then so that whole era of lawfare at the federal level will be over. There's not as much kindness or not as much tea leaf reading in the state prosecution office. Letitia James and Fani Willis seem to have personal vendettas that exceed their prosecutorial judgment. In Georgia, Fani Willis is in an ice box right now because the Supreme Court is looking at it. I think the Supreme Court will rule that she's not the right person to oversee that case given her conduct. They'll put a new prosecutor in, who'll shut that down. But just less than 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks from today, I think it is, Donald Trump will be sentenced in a Manhattan courthouse for a case that most lawyers say is hysterically wrong. There's like literally the law is made up. There's only two options. Either the New York highest court must intervene or the U.S. Supreme Court must intervene. I think the judge will put that case on hold until the issues are resolved so that he isn't sentenced, and maybe a higher court or a federal court will do that. If those things all happen, the end of lawfare as we know it would be gone. Now, there could be a new era of it. There always will be these angry people that try to weaponize the law, but I think Americans rejected that. And they rejected it in such a resounding way that I think anyone who's reading the tea leaves realize if you continue to do it, you're actually going against the will of the American people, and it might come with a consequence. I think the Democrats realize now they made Donald Trump more popular by doing the things they did to him.
Oh, I pray that that's the case. You know, Bobby, when you and I sat down the last go around, I don't know, maybe about a month ago, we were doing everything in our power to make sure that this was the outcome. Where you're sitting today, when you look to the future, share some maybe parting thoughts with our great listeners. Where do you see America headed into the future? And then I do want to have you share a little bit, Bobby, about your book, Cherish America. It is just such a beautiful book. The timing is perfect. This is a new book that's coming out. AMAC members can get their hands on that book at no cost if you renew for 5 years. And you can find that book on AMAC's website in the AMAC store. Bobby, tell us a little bit about your book and some parting thoughts about where you think we're headed.
I really appreciate that, Rebecca. Let me give you 30 seconds on each of those topics. You know, on the first one, I really want to corroborate what John says, which is I think that there is a process of putting out the fires related to these cases that is almost self-perpetuating. A hot air balloon collapses when there's no hot air in it. And ultimately, the Democrats have learned a painful lesson, which is that lawfare actually boomerangs on you. It actually comes to bite you if you keep pushing it. So the first thing that's going to happen, I think, is that the Jack Smith cases go away because there's no integrity to those cases. A new Justice Department is very well situated to drop them, literally like a hot brick. And then you look at the state level cases, and I think part of what you see here is these state level prosecutors could face prosecution themselves, and they're beginning to understand it. It's one of the reasons that once you step in the wrong direction, you often keep stepping in that direction, because to go back is a painful process. Well, I think that's why they fought so tooth and nail to try to get him jailed before this election cycle, and they kept reiterating sort of the felon charge. A false felony. Mandela and a lot of opponents of Putin have been felons. Well, they were felons because they were fighting for freedom that got suppressed when they were called a felon, right? So I think one of the things that's going to happen is the hot air is gone. And I think that what you ultimately see is a return to due process, in a sense that expectations that have been set over 200 years need to be fulfilled. That's in the corporate law area, that's personal freedom. And I think that these cases go away. On the plus side, relative to where that leads us, I think what happens is you end up with people, it's a really magical moment, because anything could happen here. Donald Trump, if he puts his arms around the American people the way I think he wants to, and says, I really don't care about your party affiliation. I want you to prosper as an individual. And I am here to make sure, because I've been in the fire, that your rights are respected, that you will not be unfairly punished. If you do something, that there are consequences with bad acts, but that as long as you abide the law and you understand what we mean by a republic and separation of powers and these Bill of Rights, that honestly I think honestly what we're going to see here is Donald Trump will in effect say to the American people, we are at a new beginning, and we're not going to do lawfare anymore, and we're not going to persecute people anymore. We're going to start talking about a level playing field and getting every American of every demographic back to where they want to be, which is really the segue to my book. This book, which was really started being written 6 years ago, is about the American spirit. It is these heroes that are in all of us. It's really a book about the greatness of America in a kind of a pointillistic picture. It's stories. There's no preaching. There's no lecturing. It's just stories about Americans, including Dan Weber, who started AMAC and really followed the blueprint that Alexander de Tocqueville laid out in 1835 and put an association together that would help preserve freedom. You go back and look at Alex de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, those 2 volumes, and one of the things that is a through theme in those volumes is that the only way Americans protect their freedom is through associations. And by that, he meant the kind of associations that AMAC is, but also associations like churches. That's the way freedom is protected. So I think we're at a magic moment, in a sense, Rebecca, when we all kind of take a deep breath and say, wow, maybe we kind of did get off the reservation. Maybe we need to get back. And I got all these calls from Democrats on the morning of, and they kind of remind me that many of them know that they've been bad behavior, that they've behaved badly, and that now they need to get back to believing the things that their parents and their grandparents taught them and that they learned when they were young. and that they know are right, and stop pretending that girls are boys and boys are girls and oppression is freedom. And, we're kind of done with the George Orwell moment. Socialism is on its way out. And I think Donald Trump represents a new opportunity for every single American.
This was just incredible. What a great analysis from you both, and just an honor to have you both. John Solomon, Robert Charles, thank you for being here with me today. And to all of you out there listening, we wouldn't be here, I don't believe, without our great 2 million AMAC members. Thousands and thousands of you stood up and went out. You got out the vote. You helped spread the message. You showed up as poll watchers, poll observers. Terrific job. We heard from the American people. The American people want a strong mandate for making America great again. So the work is only just beginning. You can be a very important key part of helping to make America great again by joining or renewing with AMAC. Be sure to tell your friends and family all about AMAC and what we have to offer. That's it for today, folks. I'm Rebecca Weber. Thanks for being with me. God bless you, and God bless America.
We are proud to have First Fidelity Reserve as our official bullion and rare coin partner, as they have supported AMAC for over a decade. Call First Fidelity Reserve 800-336-1630. That's 800-336-1630 and get your free 38-page precious metals guide today.